You think you've seen tough questions before? Wait until you hear how Jasmine Crockett stood up to President Trump live on stage and turned his own words against him. What happened next left the whole room in shock, and you might just stand up and clap when you hear it. The lights were bright, the stage was set, and the cameras were rolling. The atmosphere in the studio was almost peaceful, the kind of calm that makes you lean back in your chair and actually listen. Jasmine Crockett sat confidently, dressed sharp but simple, speaking directly into the camera. Her voice was smooth and clear with that perfect mix of calm and authority. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't angry. She was just explaining step by step why the new bill being discussed could end up hurting millions of working-class families. You could see the audience paying attention. Some were nodding, some scribbling notes. Jasmine had a way of making complicated issues sound simple. She talked about how the policy might raise costs for everyday people, how it could make life harder instead of easier. Her tone was steady, almost soothing, like she was saying, "Don't panic. Here's what you need to know." But then everything changed. From the far end of the table, President Donald Trump leaned forward. The shift was so sudden that even the host looked surprised. Then, in a voice that boomed across the entire room, Trump cut her off. "She's not even American." The words hit like a lightning bolt. The studio went dead silent. The air felt heavy, like everyone had just witnessed something they weren't supposed to hear. The host's eyebrows shot up. The camera operator froze, unsure if they should zoom in or cut to a wide shot. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't look scared. She didn't even look shocked. Slowly, she turned her head toward Trump and said in a voice calm enough to make the silence even more uncomfortable, "That's a very big accusation, Mr. President. Can you show proof of that right now?" The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't a joke anymore. This wasn't just a heated debate. This was personal. Trump hesitated for a moment, just long enough for everyone to notice. And then he repeated his claim, this time louder. He slammed his hand lightly on the desk and said, "She's not American. She doesn't represent you." But still, no proof. And Jasmine, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue back right away. She just let the silence hang in the air for a moment, making everyone feel the weight of what had just been said. Finally, she spoke again slowly, deliberately. "Mr. President, you just told millions of people that I don't belong here, that I'm not part of this country. You've said that about me. Now prove it." The host's eyes widened. The camera cut to Trump's face, then back to Jasmine's. The tension was so thick you could almost hear the crew in the back holding their breath, and then nothing. Trump didn't produce a document. He didn't cite any law. He didn't give a single fact. He just sat there repeating the accusation like it would magically become true if he said it enough times. The audience was glued to their seats. Some whispered, others shook their heads. Everyone could feel it. Something big was about to happen because Jasmine wasn't done, not even close. The tension in the studio was already thick. You could feel it through the screen. That strange mix of fear and excitement when something unexpected is about to happen. But instead of calming things down, Trump leaned in even closer. His tone got sharper, more pointed, and then he went there. He looked straight at Jasmine, jabbed a finger in her direction, and said, "Look at her. Does she look like someone who represents America to you?" A wave of gasps swept through the audience. It was no longer about policy, no longer about a debate over a bill. This was personal. This was raw. Jasmine's expression didn't change, not even a twitch. She didn't fire back right away. Instead, she let his words hang in the air like smoke from a fire, letting everyone in the room feel just how heavy they were. The host looked rattled. The audience members were whispering, their eyes darting between Jasmine and Trump, waiting for her response. Finally, Jasmine took a slow breath, straightened in her chair, and said in a calm, controlled voice, "Mr. President, what you just said is exactly why so many Americans feel unheard. You just questioned my right to be here because of the color of my skin. That is racism, plain and simple." The words landed like a punch to the gut. For a split second, you could hear nothing but the faint hum of the studio lights. Then a few claps broke out from the audience. Someone even let out a soft yes from the back row. Trump shifted in his seat, his face tightened, his jaw locked. But Jasmine kept going. "I was born here. I grew up here. I have worked my entire life to serve this country. My birth certificate says I'm American. My record says I'm American. But you, Mr. President, have no proof to the contrary. None. You simply don't like that someone like me is challenging you in public." The clapping got louder. The audience was on her side. Now, Trump tried to cut in, waving his hand, but Jasmine didn't stop. Let's be very clear. This is what happens when a leader can't win an argument with facts. They attack who you are. They attack what you look like. They try to make you small so they don't have to answer the real question. The camera zoomed in on Trump's face. His lips tightened as he tried to look unfazed, but the tension was obvious. He wasn't used to being called out this directly. Not live, not in front of this many people. And that's when the energy in the room changed. You could feel the audience shift from shock to support. Some people nodded, others whispered to each other, but everyone was waiting for Trump's next move. Would he back down? Would he apologize? No. Instead, he doubled down, insisting again, louder this time, that Jasmine was not fit to represent this country. But now it sounded weaker because Jasmine wasn't flustered. She wasn't angry. She was ready, and she was about to drop a revelation that would completely flip the room on its head. The room was already tense. Jasmine had just called out the president on live TV, and the audience could feel the shift, but no one, not a single person in that studio, was ready for what came next. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her tone calm but now carrying a razor-sharp edge. "If we're talking about who belongs where," she said, pausing just long enough for the audience to hang on her words, "then maybe we should talk about your own family, Mr. President." The audience went silent again. You could practically hear the sound of every head turning toward Trump. Trump raised his chin, narrowing his eyes, almost daring her to continue. And she did. "You and Ivanka," Jasmine said slowly, clearly, "are actually the biological parents of Barron." It felt like the floor dropped out from under the entire room. Gasps echoed around the studio. The host froze in place, his mouth half open. You could see someone in the back row put a hand over their mouth in shock. Trump's face flushed red. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a brief moment, the president, the man who never runs out of words, looked completely speechless. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She reached under the table and pulled out a thin folder. The camera zoomed in as she held it up for everyone to see. "These are documents that raise serious questions about Barron's parentage," she said calmly. "My call records timelines, things your team has never addressed." The room felt like it was holding its breath. Trump snapped out of his silence, his voice loud and sharp. "That's ridiculous. Total fake news. You're lying." But his voice cracked just slightly, just enough for the audience to notice. Jasmine didn't even flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked straight at him and said, "If it's false, then prove it. Right here, right now. You're the president. You have every resource available to you. Show us the truth." The tension skyrocketed. The cameras cut between Jasmine's calm face and Trump's tightening jaw. For a moment, Trump tried to laugh. Then he tried to wave it off, but the laughter sounded forced, like someone trying to pretend they weren't rattled. Jasmine leaned back slightly in her chair, letting him sweat under the lights. "This isn't just about Barron," she continued. "This is about power. It's about transparency. It's about why Ivanka holds more influence in your administration than the First Lady. It's about why she's sitting in meetings with world leaders speaking on behalf of this country when no other daughter in history has been given that authority." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some nodded, some whispered. Everyone could feel that Jasmine had flipped the script. She wasn't the one on defense anymore. Trump waved his hand, accusing Jasmine of making things up, of trying to attack his family. But every denial sounded weaker than the last, and Jasmine's face never changed. Calm, controlled, almost daring him to say more. The host tried to break in, but it was too late. Jasmine had already seized the moment. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was a confrontation, and Jasmine had just put the most powerful man in the country in a corner, and the audience could feel it. Something much bigger was about to unfold. Trump was furious. He pushed his chair back slightly, leaned into the microphone, and tried to laugh. A short, sharp laugh that didn't sound natural at all. "This is nonsense," he said, waving his hand dismissively. Total fake, made-up story. I don't even know where you got that folder. But the crack in his voice betrayed him. The audience heard it. Jasmine heard it, and Jasmine didn't let go. If it's fake, she said calmly, then show us the real truth. Why dodge the question if there's nothing to hide? Trump's expression hardened. He turned to the host. This is a disgrace. She shouldn't even be on this stage. She's attacking my family. It's disgusting. But the host didn't move to silence Jasmine. The cameras stayed on her, and that gave her all the room she needed to strike again. Mr. President, she said, her voice steady, you can call me names all you want, but that won't change the fact that the American people have seen your daughter sitting in on meetings with world leaders. They've seen her speaking on behalf of this country. They've seen her treated like the real First Lady. While Melania has been pushed into the background, the crowd buzzed with whispers. Some nodded. Some looked stunned. Trump tried to cut in. Ivanka is a brilliant businesswoman. She's helping the country. She's very respected, but Jasmine wasn't done. She's your daughter, Jasmine said sharply. Not an elected official, and yet she has power no first daughter has ever had. Why is that? Why does she have more influence than the First Lady of the United States? Trump's face turned redder. He pointed a finger at Jasmine. You are lying. You're spreading conspiracy theories. You're disgusting. But Jasmine didn't back down. You once said on national television that if Ivanka weren't your daughter, you might be dating her. You said it with a smile. You said it again in a magazine interview praising her looks in a way no father should. And now you want us to believe there's nothing unusual about the power she holds in your White House. The room erupted with noise. Some gasped. Some laughed nervously. Others clapped. Trump tried to overtalk her, raising his voice. That was a joke. Everybody knew it was a joke. But the energy had shifted. The audience wasn't laughing with him. Jasmine just sat there calm as ever, letting his words hang in the air before speaking again. You can joke about dating your daughter. But you can't joke about my identity as an American, she said. You can't make me less American with a sentence, and you can't make these questions go away by yelling. That line hit like a thunderclap. Trump looked frustrated, almost trapped. His usual confidence seemed to slip for a moment. He tried to look at the host for backup, but the host stayed quiet. The camera stayed focused on Jasmine, and that silence told everyone who had just won this round. The audience could feel it. The balance of power in that room had shifted, and Jasmine was now in control of the conversation, and she wasn't done yet. The room was electric. Trump had just finished shouting over Jasmine, trying to dismiss everything she said as a lie. But the crowd could tell he wasn't in control anymore. The moderator tried to step in, raising a hand. We need to move on. But Jasmine spoke first, and the moment she did, the entire room went quiet. She leaned forward slightly, her hands folded on the desk, her voice calm but powerful. This isn't just about me, she said. This isn't just about you, Mr. President. This is about every person watching right now who has ever been told they don't belong. It's about every kid who's been asked if they're really American just because of the color of their skin. The audience shifted. You could see people leaning forward, hanging on every word, Jasmine continued, her tone never rising, but her words cutting like a blade. You tried to make this about my identity. You tried to turn millions of people against me by saying, I'm not American. But I am, and no amount of yelling will ever erase that. The cameras cut to Trump. His face was still red, his lips pressed tightly together. For once, he stayed silent. Jasmine turned toward him. And while we're talking about family, we need to talk about something else. We need to talk about privilege. Because you can call me every name in the book, but the fact is you've been given the power to lead this nation. And you've used it to lift up your daughter, giving her more influence than the First Lady herself. And when people ask why, you call them liars. She paused just long enough to let the words settle. This is not about hate. This is not about revenge. This is about accountability, about fairness. You cannot demand respect for your family while disrespecting mine or anyone else's. The audience started clapping softly. It built into a wave of applause, but Jasmine wasn't done. You once said, if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her. You repeated that comment in another interview years later. You have blurred the line between family and politics. So when Americans ask questions, that's not an attack. That's democracy working the way it should." The clapping grew louder. Someone even stood up. Jasmine took one last breath and finished with a line that would echo far beyond that room. "America doesn't belong to one man, one family, or one color. It belongs to all of us. And no president, no matter how powerful, has the right to tell us who counts as American and who doesn't." The room erupted. People stood and clapped, some even shouting. Trump sat there in silence. For the first time all night, he didn't try to interrupt. The camera stayed on Jasmine as the applause rolled on. It was clear she had taken what started as a personal attack and turned it into a national conversation about race, power, and what it really means to be American. And just like that, the broadcast ended not with Trump's words, but with Jasmine's.